I'm John, I'm an alcoholic. I might be up and sitting down a little bit. What idiot shovels their driveway for 2 hours, 3.5 weeks after major surgery? This idiot. So I might be up and sitting down a little bit. Came to believe, step 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. I think my first treatment was in 1988, and I went out to Hazleton out in Center City. And being out there and seeing everything, I kind of came to believe that I could get better. And I didn't do what they told me to do, and I stopped believing. A couple years later, I went to another treatment, and then I started going to some AA meetings, and I came to believe that I could get better. I didn't do anything. You get the picture. And I would use AA, I'd go into AA to get sober when my life collapsed around me, and I would believe that I could get better, but I wouldn't do anything. I believed it because I saw people getting better, and I heard about it, and I read the stories. My last 8 years, I gave up. I stopped going to meetings, and I figured 9 treatments, jail, job loss, relationship losses, car wrecks, and I still couldn't get through my head. And the obsession to drink would overcome all ideas to the contrary, and I'd take that first drink, and when I took the first drink, it would trigger the allergy, and I'd get drunk, and I'd do more crazy stuff, right? So my decision then, I finally ultimately decided that the best thing to do was to take myself out, put myself down. So I increased my insurance dramatically at work because I was going to leave my family with $500,000, and I did this, and I didn't do anything for 2 years because I knew they'd look at me if I did something prior to that time. So when the 2 years was up, I had my plan and I had my stuff. I was going to head up to the Boundary Waters. I had about 80 OxyContin, Percocet, Vicodin, and 60 Ambien. I was going to take them and go over in the canoe. Now, fortunately, but my plans didn't work out that way. I went on a 2-day blackout, and I woke up in the emergency room, and they had confiscated everything from me, so I didn't have anything left. I'm like, what the hell am I going to do now, right? So I go home, and I got to tell you, man, that 5 days pacing back and forth in my roach-infested apartment, and no more job, no more money. I was thinking about just getting a rope, going up to the top of the building, tying to the ladder, and taking a running leap. And I was crying out, God, how can you? It was just, horrible, Bill said it best, no words can tell of the loneliness and despair I found in that bitter morass of self-pity. I had met my match. Alcohol, and for me, drugs as well, were my master. So something told me, though, when I'm crying out to God, a little voice said, call your sister. And I called her, and the next day I did end up in detox. Because I decided, hey, I don't want to die, I want to live, man. And funny enough, I remember the intake guy, he looks at me and goes, John, have you ever thought about suicide? I looked the guy square in the eye and I said, suicide? Are you kidding me? Of course not. Because I was afraid the guy was going to think I was crazy. I was stark raving insane. But I'm afraid with this guy that he's going to think I'm crazy. Right? So I took step 1 in my apartment for real that time. Let's take the last part of step 2 first. Could restore us to sanity. Now, many people, thank God, they don't get to the point that Bill Wilson got to. They don't get to the point that I got to. They get here before they get to such a low point, and thank God. And many alcoholics are highly offended. Restore me to sanity, and because they misconstrue that. And so in the dictionary, if you look up sanity, one of the definitions is wholeness. So insanity would be lack of wholeness. So if your mind is whole, if it's complete, you can see the truth, you make decisions based on the truth, and usually things turn out pretty good. But if your mind is less than whole, you make decisions based upon a lie or perhaps based upon a falsehood, and then when you run into the truth, it can be pretty upsetting. And funny enough, for us alcoholics, and even if you didn't go to a bunch of treatments, I know that most people have tried everything to quit drinking. And just before we take that first drink, we're stone cold sober. Stone cold sober. I'd come to AA, I'd go to a meeting every night for a month, and I still took that drink, man. So what this means is, can we or can we not see the truth about alcohol? If we can see the truth, we're sane. We ain't taking that first drink. If we can't see the truth, we're insane. We're going to take that first drink. So our obsession of the mind is so strong, we forget about divorce court. We forget about the car wrecks, the jails. We forget about the remorse. And even if you don't do that stuff, we forget about the remorse, the horror, and the hopelessness of the next morning. Right? They're all forgotten, and we take that drink. People come in here, we mention insanity, and they say, don't you tell me I'm crazy. I got my house, I got my job, I still have my wife, I got my car. Don't you, blah-de-blah, blah. And, that isn't what we're talking about. What we're talking about is, can you or can you not see the truth about alcohol? Or in many cases, drugs as well, right? That mental blank spot, is it going to get you? Now, later, as we go through these steps over and over, it's, am I insane enough to think that I have to judge everybody? Am I insane enough to think that I can control my boss, my girlfriend, that I can control my children? So as we go through these steps take on different meanings. When we first come in, it's because of active addiction. But as we work through them, it helps us with other things, right? So let's look at that first part. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves, right? I grew up Catholic. I grew up Catholic, and they told me that I had to believe the way they wanted me to believe, or I'm going to end up in hell. That's what they preached to me, or at the very least, purgatory, which I think is the waiting room to hell. I'm not sure. I was driving out to the retreat 3 years ago to do a first step meeting out there. Stopped for gas, and there was this $1 million bill sitting on the top of the gas pump. And what the heck's this? $1 million. So I took it and I read it. It said the $1 million question. Will you go to heaven or hell? Have you ever told a lie? Have you ever stolen anything? Have you used God's name in vain? Jesus says, whoever looks at a woman to lust for her has already committed adultery in his heart. Have you looked with lust? Will you be guilty on Judgment Day? If you have done these things, God sees you as a lying, thieving, blasphemous adulterer at heart. Now, I'm going to go to that and ask for help? You kidding me? I don't think so, man. I turned my back on the church as a kid, and I went out, I drank, I committed adultery, I stole, you name it, I did it. I broke 9 of the 10 commandments. I hope I didn't break the 10th in a blackout. I might have, because I was a blackout drinker. I don't know. Let's see what Bill did when he was presented with this situation. Near the end of a bleak November in 1934, Bill Wilson, the guy that wrote our book, he's sitting in his kitchen and he's drinking. I think it was it gin and pineapple juice? His old friend, Ebby Thatcher, comes over to his house. Now, Ebby had always been a drunkard, and Bill had never, ever seen him sober. Ebby gets there. Ebby is 2 months sober. Bill is 2/3 drunk. And, Bill's looking at him and goes, I've never seen this guy sober for the last 2 decades. What in the hell is going on here? And Ebby looks straight at him, and he says, I got religion. Well, Bill didn't like that because his grandfather set him straight on preachers, right? Ebby looked at him. He said, God has done for me what I couldn't do for myself. And Bill is just getting teed off, man. He doesn't want to hear that stuff. And Ebby, by the way, is right out of the Oxford group, and he is on fire. He's talking about God, and he's using highly religious terms, and Bill is getting madder by the minute. Don't you tell me that crap. Don't you give me that stuff. He's yelling at him. And finally, Ebby was interviewed years later, and he said he finally got pissed off. And he said, Bill, choose your own damn conception of God. And when he said that, this message went from a religious message, which says this is how you must believe, to a spiritual message, which says, do you believe for the agnostic, or are you even willing to believe for the atheist, right? Your own conception, right? Your own conception. We're not a cult. People think we're a cult. That's not what cults do. This has opened the door for countless millions of alcoholics who's had the same problem with God that I had, right? It's spiritual. It's not religious, right? Not religious. Our book, by the way, told me directly that I got to get rid of my old ideas about this kind of a God, my old prejudices, right? That dollar bill. If I can discard them and I can pick up some new ideas, perhaps I can make a decision about this God business, and I can turn my life around. Carl Jung told Roland Hazard, I love Roland Hazard, by the way, he told him, he said, have you ever seen anybody get better? And Dr. Jung, he was talking about chronic alcoholics, and Dr. Jung said, the only way I've ever seen a chronic alcoholic get better is when ideas, attitudes, and emotions, which were once the guiding force in the lives of these people, were suddenly cast aside and new ones took their place. Right? That's a spiritual experience, and that doesn't happen to very many people. Most of us get the awakening through the working of the steps, right? Page 93, working with others. He does not have to agree with your conception of God. He can choose any conception he likes, provided it makes sense to him. The main thing is that he be willing to believe in a power greater than him and live by spiritual principles. So maybe I can even just use the group as a higher power and just not lie, cheat, and steal like I've been doing my whole life, and I can possibly get better. Page 47, your own conception of God, however limited, is all we need to commence spiritual growth. Page 12, Ebby to Bill, choose your own conception, right? So the new person that comes in here and they're like, I don't know what a conception of God would be. I have no idea what that would be. And I'm never going to tell a new person that I'm working with to have faith. I ain't going to tell them that. But if they can't come up with their own conception of God, or what would you like God to be, I'll ask them, they can borrow my God, right? I'm going to tell them, here, why don't you write this down? God is powerful. God is available to me. God is forgiving. God is loving. God is gentle. God has a sense of humor. Just look around here. God's creative. God wants what's best for me. He knows what it is, and I don't. God's in my corner. God wants me to treat people better. So I never ask him to have faith. I say, why don't you act as if these things are true? That God's in your corner and he wants what's best for you. Let's do a scientific experiment. Conduct yourself as if this God is real. How would you act? And let's just see what will happen, right? And I say, this is true because, my life's working. 7 years sobriety, I'm doing pretty good. Would you get out of jail last week? Your life isn't working. Let's just try this. I don't have time tonight for the Columbus story, but I do like it. I'll tell you the mechanic story. I move into Minnetonka. Just moved here. Don't know anybody. And my car breaks down. Oh my God, I got to go to work in a week. I got to get my car. I go across the street to the neighbor and I say, hey, you know a good mechanic. He says, go down the street to Jim. He'll treat you right. He'll do a good job, give you a good price. Yeah, just to be safe, I ask somebody else. They tell me the same thing. So I go to Jim. He treats me right. He does a good job. And he charges me a fair price. 2 years later, I went there on belief because I believed what they told me. I didn't have faith in it. I didn't know it for sure, but I believed them. 2 years later, my car breaks down again. This time I go back to Jim, but I go back on faith. So belief plus experience equals faith, right? So there's a formula that the world has always known. Bill Wilson didn't invent anything. He stole these steps from the Oxford group and many different disciplines and things of thought. He didn't make anything up. There's a formula the world has always known that if you want to change anything, you've got to do these things. First of all, you've got to be willing to do so. Circumstances make us willing, right? For me, I'm dying of alcoholism. I want to live. That's making me willing. The second thing is you got to believe you can do this. So I come to these meetings. I see other people getting better. I read the stories in the back of the book. I go to speaker meetings. And I say, holy cow, man, it's working for these people, right? But we've got to go further now. We've got to make a decision. Dad, Bernard, I'm going to find out if this belief is true. In order to find that out, I have to do something else. I got to start taking action, right? I got to start taking action. So we got willingness, we get belief, we make a decision, and then we take the action. Steps 4 through 9 are the action steps. We take those steps, we have a spiritual awakening, and then all of a sudden we have faith. Step 2 says you can only start with belief. It doesn't say came to know or came to have faith in. That'd be ridiculous to ask people to have that. But if you trust me, you believe what I'm saying, right? And I'll tell you guys, I no longer believe that God will restore me to sanity. I know he will because he has done so. Although some people might disagree with that, but he has. So, you come up here and you talk about these steps, and a lot of people think, these old timers get up there and they talk about these theoretical steps. Whenever I'm up here talking, I like to tell you directly how these steps, how this program, my AA training, and you guys help me on a daily basis in my higher power. Because these are not theoretical, man. They help me get through every day. 4 weeks ago today, day before I was going to go in and get my hip resurfaced, I went to get my truck. I want to get my truck ready, so I went in, I oil change, gas it up, wash it, store it, so I got something to drive when I get out and when I'm ready. Guy comes out of the oil change, and he says, "Oh, John, the Toyota Tacomas your year had a problem with frames rusting through. Well, your frame is rusted through. You better start thinking about getting a new car." I'm like, what? Oh, this is odd, going in for Jesus, right? So I got this going on in my head. I get home, I look it up online. Tacomas, Toyota Tacomas, 2001, 2004. Horrible rust problem with the frames. They were giving out huge checks up through 2013, but they stopped, And so this is, I get in my surgery, my customers at work, I got all this crap going on in my head, and I'm gonna just talk about my truck. And, so I'm just thinking, well, God, I froze my credit because of the Experian thing. I'm going to have to unfreeze my credit. 15 grand down payments. My insurance triples. At the very least, it's going to be $5 grand to fix a $5 grand truck. This is just horrible. Driving in there, Eric recommends a frame specialist to me. Many of you know Eric. And he drives me over there on Tuesday. We drop it off. I tell him the story. I haven't been able to get and look at it because of my hip. And the guy goes, "That's all right, just drop it off." He calls me 2 hours later. He goes, "John, we got her up on the hoist." "Okay, world, give it to me. I'm a victim. Come on, give it to me. You always do. Come on, worst case scenario." "Well, there's a little bit of rust, but otherwise it's perfectly fine." Now, I had never considered that. I never believed that something would actually work out good because, you know what, we alcoholics, me included, we tend to catastrophize things, right? I don't care how long you've been sober, everybody does it. So I'm trying to live by these principles and practice these principles, but sometimes what happens is I get distracted. This truck thing distracted me, let alone everything else that's going on. When I get distracted, what do? I start thinking. Oh my God. When I start thinking, I get disturbed. Oh, I get stuck up here. When I get disturbed, I become afraid. When I become afraid, I got to be defensive. And then what do? I lash out at people. And then they retaliate, and I wonder what the hell's going on here, right? So, one thing that we really got to watch out for alcoholics is sometimes we just got to believe that things are not going to be horrible. They're going to be okay, man. They're going to be okay. Because whatever we start to think about in our head expands. If I think that guy really screwed me the other day, then that's going to expand into a big book in my head, right? And I don't want that, because then pretty soon I'm madder than hell. If I've got these fears and I'm thinking about fears, it's going to expand into a big narrative in my head. That's what happens. Whatever we think about expands, right? They won't accept me. The steps won't work for me. Things are going to be horrible. Well, how about if I believe that God's in my corner? How about if I believe that, man? How about if I believe that even though I'm going to run into hard things in sobriety, ultimately I'm going to be okay no matter what the hell he throws at me? Yeah, people are going to die. A good friend of mine's dying of cancer. That's you know what? Yeah, we're going to get through it. It's going to happen. Nothing I can do. People lose their jobs. They lose their homes, right? They get divorced in sobriety. But I got a higher power. I got the steps, and I got you guys. And I know that I'll get through it, and ultimately I'm going to be okay. I mean, we got to watch out, because perception is reality. Perception is reality. So what we believe to be true is our truth. If you believe God's not going to help you, he, she, it isn't going to help you, right? So, maybe we should believe that God is going to help us. We don't respond to what actually happens in the world, by the way. We don't respond to what happens in the world. We respond to what we say to ourselves happened in the world. And there's a filter there, and we can get screwed up. Now, if you've got some of these self-defeating beliefs, because these are other things we can get rid of, man. I've seen people, they come in here, they believe they won't accept me. They ain't going to love me. I'm not worth it. I'm going to fail. God's abandoned me. I deserve these horrible things to happen to me because I am unworthy of anything good. I've seen people, and if you're believing that, I'm telling you to change your damn beliefs, because that isn't true. God doesn't see anybody as substandard. And I think, pretty sure God wants everybody to succeed and be happy. And remember, damn it, God is in your corner. That's it.